everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Johanna Richey. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Jeff.
How you doing today?
Doing wonderful.
Well, we have a phenomenal guest today, one of the leaders in the field of podiatric medicine, Dr. Paul Kim. Dr. Kim, welcome to Dean's Chat.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, Jeff.
You know, we've been trying to put this together for a couple of months, and it's finally happening, so I'm excited about that. Paul, or Dr. Kim, we go with first names on Dean's Chat. It's pretty informal. If it's okay with you, let's go Paul and Joe and Jeff.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, I'm going to jump in, and it's a real honor today. Dr. Kim was one of my big mentors when I was a student, and now I am sitting in the podiatry office on the other side of the desk, and it's a really awesome opportunity to have you here. So thank you so much for taking the time to do a brief introduction. And I'm going to say brief because, again, you have a remarkable CV, but a brief introduction. Dr. Kim is currently the medical director of the wound program at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas, Texas. He's also the professor in the Department of Plastic Surgery as well as orthopedics. Was a previous professor here at Midwestern University, which is how I was first introduced to him, but originally got his bachelor's degree in psychology and biology from the University of Colorado in Boulder. Went on to do podiatric medical school in Ohio College of Podiatric Medicine and graduated in 2002. Then went to the Inova Fairfax Hospital for his surgical residency training. Has worked in lots of different practice settings, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that, and currently is in Dallas, Texas. One interesting fact that I did not know as I was going through your CV, after all of that training, you went back and got a master's degree in clinical research management from Arizona State University. Right. So welcome to Dean's Chat.
Thank you. I'm just so delighted to be here. It really comes back full circle, Joe. I just want to tell a couple stories about you, if you don't mind starting. So I've been in education my entire career, and I've trained hundreds, if not thousands of students, residents, and fellows. And I don't have a great memory. I just want to tell everybody that. But certain people stick out, and Joanne's one of those people that I've never forgotten. So, you pop up on my radar once in a while. I hear your name or see you lecture or something. I'm like, I got to go talk to her. But here we are, Joe. It's almost 18 years later.
Yeah.
This is our first sit-down discussion.
Right?
That's on me. That's not on you, by the way. And I feel really bad about that because I probably could have reached out to you sooner and said, hey, what's going on with your life? How is everything? But I will tell you, I've learned a lot about you on this podcast. And Jeff, and that's really to your credit because I watch it, and it's just fascinating because some of these people I kind of know peripherally. Some people I know better. You guys recently did one with Glenn Weinrob, who I've known for 20 plus years. He's a great man, great surgeon, just a wonderful person to know. And then Jamie Meares, who I hadn't really even thought about in probably over a decade. And I'm like, that's another student that stuck out in my head. And by the way, Joanne was an amazing student. I mean, you could tell right away she's going to be a star. There's and she may be giving me a little credit, but I don't deserve it because it was going to happen anyway. I mean, you just kind of know with these people. And I'm so glad, Joanne, that we have a chance to speak. And Jeff, I'm glad you're here too, but I don't know you as well, obviously. But I did have a Jeff as a boss at ASPOT when I was there. Jeff Page was an amazing guy, still is an amazing guy. He was a great mentor to me because that was my first job. It's crazy thinking about that. But going back to Joe, you see these students that ask questions, and a lot of students ask questions, but very few students ask the right questions. And she was one of those that stuck in my head. I'm like, oh, she really is not only interested, but passionate about learning. And she's just going to be an amazing leader in our profession. You just see, Jeff, you have as much experience with this as I do. You just know. You just meet somebody once, you're like, okay, there's another one. And that's not to say anything negative about any of your co-students, Joanne. You had a wonderful class, I think, I remember right. But there's just a couple people that still stick out in my head and like, okay, that person is going to be so Ryan Rigby is another one that I still remember. I'm like, okay, there's another great student. He's going to be a star, and he is, and both of you are. But I apologize for this belated last meeting or discussion. I wish you and I could just, have a beer together and just sort of catch up and be off camera, so to speak. But I think you know me well enough to know that I am who I am, whether it's in front of other people or in front of just one person. I'm the same person, whether you like it or not. This is how it is. But I just really, I'm looking forward to this discussion. I know we have a little bit of time. I'm not sure exactly what the time limits are, but you just tell me when to stop talking, and I'm good. I just had a tuna fish sandwich, so I'm good to go. That's my meal for the day, and I'm fired up. I had my little power drink because I've been in clinic all day and meetings, and it just wears you down. But I just want to say something that you mentioned. You're talking about my CV. All of that is meaningless. That's what I learned. It doesn't mean anything. People will ask for your CV and your let me just close out my email here because we're getting dinged here. But your bio sketches, and people will introduce you at different lectures and seminars. And I just think in the back of my head, that really meant something at some point in my career, but it doesn't anymore. My legacy is the people that I've had in contact with, and people like Joe and you, Jeff, and others that have really influenced my career, my perspective, not only professionally, but personally as well. And I don't think we can see that dimension in a CV. CV is just a bunch of words, and it doesn't, to me, have any long-lasting legacy. It's those even brief or even more in-depth relationships that we have that are more meaningful. And I will tell you, I'm like a nomadic scholar. I go from one institution to another, trying to look for the next best thing and trying to understand what would satisfy me. But when I think about being at Georgetown, I was there for 10 years, almost 10 years. Now I'm at UT-Southwestern now, almost 5 years. I don't think about the places. I think about the people.
Yeah.
And is related to what you're talking about. It's all about mentorship. I've had some great people around me who have identified something in me, who knows what that is, and said, I really want to help this person. And so that's one of the things that I've been working on the last several years, is to be a better mentor, which is, to me, the most challenging professional goal that I've had to date. Now, I've done the research. I'm doing the administration now. I think I kind of understand that part, but good mentorship is so much of value because it's a long-lasting legacy that goes well beyond your professional career, even after you die. These people will continue a piece of you forever. And, I think that's amazing. And what a gift. And I've not done a great job always. I'd be the first one to admit that, but I'm working on it.
Well, it's interesting, Paul, because it seems like we all pay it forward at different times in our careers. And I'll just give you a quick story. Last week, I was at UC-Boulder with Jamie Miras, and we were doing a suture workshop with undergraduate students, and Jamie was influencing that next generation.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
you influenced Jamie, and Jeff Page influenced you. It's like the circle of life, I tell you.
Yeah, it is crazy how that happens. And like I said, when I think about my achievements, I don't think about the accolades or the publication or anything. I think about the people that were around me during that time, and that's what sticks with me. And I hope to convey that to my mentees. And I will tell you, Joanna, and this is, and she knows this better than I do probably, but I was not a good faculty member at ASPOD. My vision of my goals of being there, I think it wasn't in me to be a classroom teacher. It's not part of my character. I thought it was, because that was always been my goal. Mm-hmm. But I realized, and that's one of the reasons I left, because I'm like, I'm not doing a service to these students. And certainly I was not satisfied at that time. So that's one of the reasons I'm like, okay, I have to teach at a resident level. I did that for 9 years, and also fellows 9 to 10 years at Georgetown. But then I realized something there. That's not my level either. So when I came here, they're fellows, so they're graduates. And I found that was a better fit for me because I don't have the patience for teaching in a more gentle, as Joanne can attest to, more gentle kind of touch. Whereas a fellow, I feel like I can have a discussion. It's like I've got 2 kids, at every age of my children, I love them to death, and they're different at every age. But I really honestly felt that I could not impact their lives until they were older. Now they're 17 and 15, where I can dialogue with them, and it's more satisfying to me to be present now than when they were really little, where I could offer very little. I could hold them, I could do some other things, but there was no real interaction. So, and that's likened to my professional development as well. I did research for almost 10 years and it was very satisfying, but ultimately that was a skill that I felt like I kind of had mastered. And I'm like, well, what's next? And that's how I ended up UT-Southwestern, taking a half-time administrative role in a large wound program of over 50 people. That I was like, okay, that's my next challenge. I gotta figure that piece out.
That actually is a beautiful segue, because I'm curious if some of the adaptations that you've, like career adaptations, right? You try something on, you get more experience, you develop, and then you have that innate like, okay, I feel like I got what I needed, or maybe this wasn't for me and I'm going to move on. Mm-hmm. If that is a natural history of a profession, or there's some interesting sidebars, conversations about a job, a profession, and a craft. Mm-hmm. And I think this is really interesting. Again, not so much in our profession, people talk of it, but what I hear you saying is this cultivation of your craft has evolved with time. And so I'm curious, in this new role that you have, because this is a really unique opportunity as a medical director of this wound center, what are some of the things that you find you love the most about that role?
Well, Joanna, you're just so bright and intuitive. There's so many things in that question that I think you would understand, but I will tell you, first of all, it's not a wound center, it's a wound program. So both in and outpatient. So it's surgeons, non-surgeons, nurses, WOCNs, MOAs, front office. It's like the whole shebang. So it's challenging, and I can get into the weeds of why I don't like certain aspects of it. But I think the heart of your question is not about the natural evolution of a craft for me. It's about introspection at certain times of your career where you're like, where you kind of pause and say, okay, is this what I want to do? Is this what I want to do? And do I want to put in all that effort because this is the place I want to be? And so I think we all go through that. And I tell the fellows that all the time, because they're so nervous about their first job. Oh, I got to get this job. It's the right place. It's the right person, the situation. I'm like, you're going to leave within 5 years. Why do you care? And that, and people kind of forget that. And as young people, I don't think they have the wisdom of retrospection of which is what age gives you. Is like, you don't know what you like or what you don't like, where your strengths are. And that's the hard part for some people, and it's hard for me too, I'm no exception, is to really put a mirror in front of you and say, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Where do I need to develop? And where am I satisfied? And that last piece is just as important as the development piece. Where are you satisfied? Because you don't ever want to be in a position where you're not happy, because it's reflected in your personality. It's reflected in the way you communicate with people. It's reflected in the work that you do, the quality of work you do. So I think people's quality of work depreciates if they're not happy with what they're doing. And that gets me to another piece that I want to just say before I forget during this, is that I love podiatry. I am so thankful for this profession and what it's provided me. And I want to make it clear, because I know, Jeff, Joe, you have students that probably watch this. There may be some questioning in their first couple years, and maybe there was that. I knew when I was there, that was the kind of question I got. Like, not sure this is the right profession for me. But I will tell you, there isn't a day goes by that I am so thankful to do what I do. We bring a level of expertise that nobody else can provide. I've been in 2 major health systems, and I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, we are absolutely the best at what we do. There's nobody else in that hospital system that can do what we do. And so I want to encourage your students to kind of stick it out, because the first couple of years are hard. There's no question about it. But there is an end of that tunnel, and you'll realize what a blessing it is to be in the position that you are. I don't think I could have achieved as much as I have if I wasn't a podiatrist. And so to me, I've never seen it as a barrier. It's always been a bridge. And so I think if you go in with the mindset of, I'm going to be competent, that's number one, because you have to demonstrate that. It's not going to be given to you. You have to demonstrate competency and passion. Then the world is your oyster, and whatever path you choose, that is open to you. I think we have the chip on our shoulder where we create these artificial barriers. I can tell you from 20 plus years of practice in three different academic centers. That doesn't exist. There are no barriers. Those are things that we create for ourselves. And if the external world is not creating that, then what's stopping you? Go out and get it, as the young people say. Do they say that, Joanne? I don't even know what they say.
Just do
I
it.
haven't heard that one in a while, but
Just do it. No, Jeff, that's 1990s Nike Air Jordan kind of talk.
There you go. Yeah, that's true. It's still pertinent though.
Yeah.
It's great. A great philosophy, and you're so right. I mean, passion and competence go hand in hand, and I might add, competence and confidence go hand in hand. And my gosh, if you've got those, the sky's the limit. I mean, you're absolutely right. The only lids that you put on are the lids that you put on yourself. I agree with you.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. And it really kind of something that I watched you guys talk to Alan Jacobs the other day. He's amazing, man. I mean, I know you guys probably have met him personally, but he is so wise. I mean, he's one of the wisest people. He's like a sage. You go up to the altar of Alan Jacobs and you ask him his advice. And he's such a kind guy that he will talk to you, and he will be very honest. The struggles, the triumphs, all of that, and he will give you good advice. And so that's, again, even though I don't know him very well, but he's one of those guys that I think is an amazing mentor. There's a handful of people that I can say have been amazing in my life, and everybody's mentors, by the way, are different. Mm-hmm. So my mentors are different than Joe's mentors, is Jeff's. And it doesn't matter. The other thing about mentorship, it doesn't matter about age, is what I found. Sometimes mentors could be younger than you. It depends on that area of that you need mentoring in. Will kind of dictate whether it's a good fit. The other thing about mentorship I've learned is you can't force it. I've had a lot of people like, oh, I like what you do. I know I like you. I followed your career. Can you please help me? And I try. But sometimes you get the sense that it's just not a good fit. And that's okay. You just move on, both for the mentor and the mentee, or the potential mentor and mentee. You just move on, find somebody else. There's always somebody. I mean, unless you're really, just not a nice person, you're going to find somebody that is going to help you.
Absolutely.
I would say it's nice too to have those opportunities to back to the very first part of your conversation about the importance of just relationships and foundations of communication.
Right.
You don't know who you're going to mesh well with, and who maybe, like the old saying, like, never meet your heroes, right? Because you get to know them and you're like, wow, you're not at all what I thought you were.
Yeah.
But you don't, having those opportunities to just connect with people. And, some of the beautiful things in some of the large national meetings that we have are those opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get something out of the CME events, and go and you learn something new, and that's wonderful. But at some point, not that much changes over time. And some of now my favorite experiences are reconnecting with people and having that, like, wow, let's catch up. And it's amazing how much how small the profession is, and how much those little not networking, because that sounds, the connectivity, we'll say. Yeah. Networking has this like weird feel, but the connectivity of it is incredible.
It's what I call it's a shared experience of misery. And that's people talk about that. I've never served in the military, but people that have served in the military together, you talk about that, and we used to, and as you get further away from residency, Joanne, you probably still do this, but as you get further away, your co-residents have this shared experience with you during your residency program. That's special, and that will never change. The other thing that you mentioned is absolutely right. Mentors change because your needs change, because you're growing as a person. So that's okay. You don't need a lifelong mentor. I honestly think that's not a good way to go. Mm-hmm. You need different influences at different times of your life, both professionally and personally. And it could be both, and often what happens is you become close to somebody who's your mentor or mentee, and it crosses that line into personal, getting to know each other personally, which makes it even more intimate and more trusting of an environment. And that could be dangerous, by the way. I've seen it go sideways. but I think if you are in a good fit, if it's a good fit, then that would be a lifelong, but you'll still seek other people. I still view myself as just out of practice. This is 20 years later. just out of residency. And I'm still seeking mentors, and people look at me like, you're crazy, you're old, you should already be done. I'm like, what are you looking for mentors? I'm like, well, I still have things that I need to work on, and I need some help.
Paul, if you don't
And
mind.
I think that's a unique, go ahead, sorry, Jeff. That's a unique perspective, because not everybody feels that way, but we'll circle back to that.
I think it's a great perspective. Paul, would you mind sharing some of your mentors and how they influenced you at different times of your life in different ways?
Oh, absolutely. And I can start back all the way into my residency program. Well, let me even go back even further than that. I'm not going to say where I went to school, but there was a professor there. I don't know what the true rank of he was, but I was interested in diabetic foot a long time ago as a student, and I even published as a student on using nitrous oxide topically. It doesn't work. That's what I found out, but there were some methodological errors that probably caused it not to work. But I remember having a conversation with this person, and I'm saying, I'm really interested in diabetic foot ulcer. And they said, well, what's there to learn about that? It's all been learned. That struck me as being wrong. And I didn't have the knowledge to say so at the time. And, I've discovered that it is very wrong, that statement. There's so much we don't know, and so much we can't fix in that problem. But I would say that person was the opposite of mentor for me, because I still kept going to them, peppering them with, or him or her, with questions and getting really bad answers. And I realized this is not the person I need to connect with. But there was a guy, I think you may know him, Donald Kushner. Does that name sound familiar to you? He's well retired.
I don't remember Donald.
Okay. He was one of my professors at OCPM who was very encouraging in a very subtle way. He either thought I was a really weird kid or just he felt sorry for me. I'm not sure, but he really did guide me a lot in a lot of different ways. And the thing that I appreciated about him was he would often say to me when I would ask a question, I don't know. And I thought that was really refreshing, considering the influence of somebody else that was there. So I think he's probably one of my very early ones. And then Chris Attinger, who I worked for 9 years and is still in practice and well into his 70s. He's just as sharp as you can be and physically fit and still operating every day and everything else. He was one of the early people. I remember a conversation that when I was a resident on his service, and he hired me, 5 years later, but when I was doing my rotation with him, we were in an elevator together. And he just turned to me out of the blue and he said, I don't understand you podiatrists. And I kind of sheepishly stepped back, got a little bit of a defensive posture. But he didn't mean it in a bad way. He goes, you guys can do so much, but all you see is your limitations. Because he had been working with podiatry and he knows our profession inside and out. And so that struck me. And then I developed a relationship with him. And one of the first things that when I was graduating, I went back to him and I said, Dr. Attinger, what do I need to work on? And he goes, you need to dissect in the cadaver lab. That's what he said. So, Joe, what did we do? We did a ton of dissection in the cadaver lab, didn't we? Because that was my first job afterwards, and I never forgot what he said.
Yeah.
So he's another one. John Steinberg is more of a friend than a mentor to me. We're about the same age, although he looks like he's 12 and he's Opie. Old show, but nobody will know that reference. But you and me, Jeff.
Right. Well, I'm with you. We're on the same page. Just do it.
Okay.
Just do it.
So, John and I have become very close as friends, but, he was already out of fellowship when I was doing my third year rotation at Georgetown. And so he skipped a couple grades in college or something. I don't know what happened with him. Anyway, he and I continue to keep in touch. He's guided me on multiple aspects of professional life, especially work for industry, which is something that I don't know if you guys have had a chance to talk about on the podcast. That's a weird world, I'll tell you.
Yeah, we haven't as much as we could. I mean, this could be a nice beginning to that discussion.
Okay. So, well, let's get into it, Jeff. You got some time?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You ate your tuna fish sandwich like I did? You're good?
Yeah.
I had a caprese sandwich, so we're good.
We're good to go.
Okay.
Now, Paul, but one thing though, Paul, let's go about 15 more minutes about you, and then maybe we do another part.
Well, I don't have 15 minutes about me left.
Oh yeah, we got lots to discuss here.
Yes, we do, because you left me with a cliffhanger that I want to circle back to. So,
okay.
But Paula, what I was thinking was maybe we do another episode on clinical research, industry-related work, consulting, things like that, because you've done a lot, I've done a lot, and I know we've got a lot of colleagues. Maybe we get a couple more on. That'd be a lot of fun.
And I would say that would be a great podcast because honestly, it's like a black box, right, Jeff? Nobody likes to talk about it. It's like we're doing some sort of secret service work or something. And I don't feel that way. And so my relationship with industry is very different than others. But anyway, that's for another conversation, I suppose. So where was I? So mentors. So certainly, John and I became very close and friends, and we continued to interact a lot. And that was one of the toughest things for me to do, is leave Georgetown not having working with him every day and every hour of the day. That was a tough move for me. There's been others, and research Larry Lavery certainly, and that's one of the reasons I came here, because he's such a prominent publisher in the diabetic foot space. I wanted to leech as much information I could from him, because he's getting up there as well, and he's still actively doing research, still very active in clinical practice. But I wanted to kind of poke his brain to see what else is kind of tooling around in there that I had to think about. There's other people that like Tom Chang early on, through ACFAS, just like what Joe said. I met him very early on, and the reason was he's Asian, I'm Asian. It was kind of as simple as that. And I was young. I was a lot more aggressive than I am now as far as seeking out people and stuff. And he and I got fairly close, at least professionally. And so he was able to guide a lot of the surgical pieces, and every big move I made professionally, I would call him before I committed, say, well, what do you think about this? And he would give me feedback, like, here are the pros, here are the cons. The thing about Tom is, do you know Tom, by the way, Jeff?
Yeah, I know him. I've worked with him a little bit, mostly professional, not personal at all.
Okay. Joe, do you know Tom Chang?
I worked with him a little bit with Samuel Merritt. He would come and lecture for me.
Oh, so, great. Yeah. The only problem I had with Tom is that he's too he's too optimistic. He's too positive. He's like, oh, that's going to be great. You're going to do great. And sometimes you want a little real, but he had a little bit of that too. Here's your reality check for this. So, but he's another person. Glenn Weinrob, we talked about already. There's just been so many, it's hard to put all one of my current mentors is Jeff Kenkel, who's department chair here at UT-Southwestern. He's a plastic surgeon. It's amazing to watch him lead. And that's something that, I came here to learn, is how to be a leader. And, he has his own style. Every good leader has their own style, but I appreciate his transparency and his honesty with people that work for him. And that's something that I'm trying to learn to incorporate in my leadership style, because I think that's important. And setting realistic goals, being realistic in general, as far as what the expectation should be for people. I think we tend to put people in nice little boxes thinking that's who they are. And then you find out when they move out of that box, we're uncomfortable with that. I think you have to be able to expand that box for them and say, okay, now I see you like this instead I first saw you like this. That's a real hard skill, by the way. Maybe Jeff, you have that skill mastered since you're the dean of the school and you have all this faculty coming to, get your advice. And I don't know, is that true?
Paul, I'm still a work in progress too. But
yes, that's good to hear.
I mean, I think we all grow constantly in different facets of our positions, and not unlike you. I mean, I made some shifts too, right? I was in private practice. I started a residency, went to become a dean in Miami, became this research director at the entire university, and then made the switch over to Arizona. So it's making changes like that is not easy, and you got to be optimistic, and you have to be ready to dive in head first, right? And so you learn a lot when you dive in head first.
Well, that's interesting, Jeff, because I think your optimism is pure optimism. For me, it's a worst case scenario. Like, what's the worst that can happen? I don't necessarily think that's optimistic, but that's kind of like, yeah, what's the worst could happen? So yours is, it's going to be great. And I think some people are built like that, and that's okay. Whatever your personality is, I think we all have a general trend of people that have been deemed to be more successful than others. I think we do have this little, I hate to say it, but maybe I have a little optimism in me too. I certainly prepare for failure. That's just my character. That's just inbred into me. I prepare to be disappointed and to fail. But there's always, but you have to take a risk. I think people that don't necessarily succeed as much as they like, they haven't taken the risk. And Jeff, you just outlined in your career, you made a bunch of moves. Each one of them was a risk. And for me and Joanne, I'm sure before she moved here to not here, but to Arizona, that was a risk, right? You took a risk. You didn't know how things would work out. And so I guess we're all have this common trait of both optimism and a little bit of a risk taker. You certainly hedge your bedges, you hedge your bets, because you want to make sure you want to shift the probability in your favor. But all of the variables you can't control. We're talking about research now, Joe. So
yeah. Oh, this is so good. This is so good.
You have to look at the Gaussian curve.
Yeah.
You got to look at your standard deviations.
Yeah.
No, I think it's I've just been so lucky. I guess that's the other thing. There is some luck to it. You just land. You perhaps made some right decision. You had some great guidance, of course, but some of it's luck and family. Joanne, do you have children? I
do. Yeah, we have a 5-year-old, almost 6. She'll be 6 next month, and a 8-year-old. She just turned 8.
8 and 6.
Yeah,
that's unbelievable.
And they're amazing.
You have 2 little kids, and you're here doing this and talking to some guy like me, sacrificing time away from your family. And Jeff, you have children that are older, or
between 22 and 32.
Okay.
Yep.
So those are kind of the unsung heroes, right? Because something has to give, and it's usually your family. And unfortunately, and one of the things, I'm on LinkedIn, obviously you guys are on LinkedIn. There's a lot about this work, family, balance, BS. I'll tell you, I've never met anybody that's been balanced.
Agreed.
It's always tipped in one direction or the other, depending on what day of the week it is, what time of the day it is. Where are you in your career path? I think it doesn't exist. And I think what it does is it causes undue stress on people to try to create this fictitious thing that doesn't exist. We only have so many hours a day. You have only so many gallons in your tank. You choose to spend it the way you want, and your priorities change over time. That's for sure. That's what I've learned. And so if I can make a choice, but something's going to give.
Yeah.
Something always gives. And it's okay. That's not necessarily a negative thing that something gives. But I think for students and residents and fellows and everybody else, I talk to them the same way that I'm talking to you guys. I'm like, okay, don't worry about what people say about getting this work-life balance and something that you've been sold the goods that if you go to podiatry school, you're going to have a great work-life balance. That's not true. If you want a home life, then you create it. That's up to you. That's your option. But something is going to give. Meaning you're going to see less patients in the day to get home a little bit earlier. You want to take less calls, so you're not doing it. You're not on the add-on list all night, so you're not away from your family. But you have to understand that you still have that choice. You make that choice. It's not given to you. It's not already predestined for you. You got to make that decision.
Paul, I had a little flashback here. Go back 20 years. I remember when I first started a medical device company, right? And it became the TCC-EZ, and you know that story. But my wife and I had 4 kids under the age of 10, and I remember owing the patent attorneys $50,000 all at the same time. And, juggling research, juggling NIH grants, seeing patients, doing surgery. I don't have that energy anymore, Paul. There's a time and place for everything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is, it's interesting, Jeff. By the way, we have like 30 boxes of your TCC in our team. we do use a lot of it. So I hope you're getting some royalties off of that because you well deserve it.
It's all good.
Joanne, it's different. Like, for example, Jeff's got grown kids, I assume out of the house. My kids are about to leave in the next couple of years. You have another, good 10 years before you have to face that. Yeah. But, I will tell you I don't remember when they were really little, I was working at Georgetown. I was pulling 12, 16 hours a day. I never saw them because when I came home, they were asleep. Yeah. When I left, they were still asleep. And on the weekends, the days that I had off, what happened is that I was so tired that I would sleep. Mm-hmm. So then you miss all of that time. But having said that, you still, especially, and I don't mean to I don't think this is sexist, Joanne. I think this is a reality. For women, it's different.
Absolutely.
I think the demand is higher, unrealistically high. and something's got to give, and there's always the guilt, and I feel it too. I feel it to this day. Like, I didn't spend enough time with them, but that was my choice. I own that, and I try to make up for it. We do the best we can as parents, and you hope that things work out for the best.
And I think so. There's so many points that I'd love to touch on the things that you said, and because that was the last statement, we'll jump on that one first. And I think your point is so important right now. There's all this talk about work-life balance, and it's absolute garbage in my mind. It's a total myth, and it actually creates stress and anxiety trying to create a balance that just forget about it, right?
Yeah.
But what I do hope people start to think about, and Dr. Ciccinelli talks about harmony, so I like that idea. I've heard work-life alignment. Again, this idea that you're centering around core values that bring joy to your, like, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no way to balance. I also think that it's false to assume if you're giving, 50% at work, you have to give 50% at home to have balance. That's just not realistic, right? No. Or that if you're doing more at work, you must be doing less at home. Like, that's just not true. And so it makes people feel stress.
Yeah.
But what I hope, and not to get super soapboxy, but certainly the journey that I had to personally go through is the recognition of when it's not your choice, that you are, and let me take that back. It's an unintentional choice. It's always a choice, but you're saying yes to things that are inherently saying no to something else.
Right.
And if you haven't been, intentional about that, you may not be okay with that trade-off. And my kids were, let's see, like 4 and 2 when just the weight of it all was like, I don't want to miss these things. And I'm having to do these things. And it's like, who's making you do? At that point, I was in private practice. So like, who's really making you do it? Like, no one is standing there forcing you to do something. So you really, have to figure out what really matters right now in your life, because no one's going to force you into something. Now, I do want, again, for the broad audience that we're talking to, there are work situations where you don't get to make those choices. Someone is making them for you. And so having an opportunity to maybe have some self-reflection, is this what I want then? Is this the way that I want to practice? Knowing that there is no perfect practice, there is no perfect work situation, but what are the negatives that you're willing to accept and say, okay, these are the trade-offs that I can do this because I can spend my time with family or research or clinical, whatever it is, right? It doesn't have to always be centered around family if that's not where your vision and values are. But having that intentional choice rather than, I heard mentors of mine get to where they're like, my kids are in college and I'm now realizing I'm never going to get that back. Like there are some things in life that have a timestamp and a window. And so going even further back in our conversation, you said something that I think was so poignant about uncertainty, right? We can't even pretend that we're going to know what's important to us in 10 years from now, maybe not even 5 years from now, right? Because as we grow and mature and age, we do change. And so there's no way that I can successfully predict what is really going to be important in my life 10 years from now. But as humans, our neuroscience, we don't like uncertainty. We want to solve for that variable, right?
Absolutely.
So my question for you is, as you have had opportunities to take a risk and take a dive and see how it plays out and grow and adapt, what have you used or maybe not intentionally, but is there a framework or how do you kind of process all of that?
Yeah. And although I feel like I'm a pretty thoughtful person, some of this stuff I'm telling you guys for the first time that I've ever kind of verbalized. It's just kind of things that have been thrilling in my head. But I think you hit on a couple of key things, Joanne, and this is more for your students, I think, as this discussion kind of evolves. It depends on how you define success. And I use that term a couple times already, but success is different for everybody. And your definition of success, to your point, Joanne, it changes over time. Yeah. So for me, it's about goal resetting all the time. So my goals when I was graduating out of residency is certainly different a couple of years later, and then certainly it kept kept changing because, as you pointed out, we change as people. Our life circumstances change. Perhaps you become a mother, father, uncle. It doesn't matter. You change as a person, so your goals are changing. I find that people that aren't flexible in that, what they do is they spiral into anxiety because of the uncertainty you're talking about, and depression ultimately. And then they kind of just sign out. And you hate to see that demise, but I see it frequently. And so first define your success and then be willing to change that definition as you grow. I think that's the advice. And by the way, I'm spewing all this garbage. It's not that I've done it right. I want to make sure everybody knows that I've made a ton of mistakes, but I think the person that perseveres is, despite those mistakes, you take the next step. And some people just simply don't. And then they become disgruntled. And then we all hear about it. Yeah. And I don't want to hear about it. I just don't want to hear about it. I don't have the patience for that.
I heard a really beautiful thing in French. They take, and forgive me, anyone who's French, and maybe I'm not getting this totally accurate, but they look at the difference between regret and remorse differently. That regret is when you did not take action and you wish that you had, versus remorse where maybe you did something and you wish that you hadn't. And so kind of, again, prioritizing, if I had to look back, would I rather have acted and, well, at least I tried, or at least now I know, or whatever, versus I kind of wish I would have tried or done something different. It was interesting that they actually frame it differently.
I think that's perfect, Joe. And part of that, you have to put an asterisk on there. So you can't try to achieve a goal that is just simply not achievable.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was watching Jamie, by the way, that was a delightful podcast. I just sat there and I'm like, I just big smile on my face. I'm like, I'm so glad. There's two of my students doing so well, just personally, professionally. It just made me so happy. I just want to say that first of all. But, she's like running 1,000 miles. I don't know how many miles she said, but I was like, what? And I knew that she did that kind of thing. But again, her goals are different and it was achievable for her. Yeah. If I tried that after mile 1, I would have a massive MI. It would be done for me. And so I think you have to be realistic as well as optimistic in saying, is that truly achievable? And the hardest part for people to do is look at themselves really honestly and say, is that within me? Yeah. And I think some people make the mistake in thinking that it is within them when it's actually not. And this is where I think mentors do a good job, because they're almost like parents. As Joe, your kids are growing up. One of the things that we do as parents is we watch them like a hawk, and we don't even realize it all the time. And this is a kind of a behavior. So all the little nuances of their behavior, you just, because you've just been staring at them, And so as mentors, as good mentors, they recognize not only the strengths that we have and encourage us, but the limitations we have and discourage us from going a certain direction. I will tell you a story from my father-in-law who passed away, who I was very close to. He and I were sitting down when I was an undergrad in college. This is when I was dating my wife. And he's like, what are you going to do? What's your future? Not in a, like in an angrier way. He was just curious, like, what are your plans for the future? And I said, I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go, what's next for me. He goes, what I found was that it's not about opening closed doors. It's about walking through the doors that are already open. And so I think that's a distinction, because people try to rattle on that door. They try to hammer through that door. I'm going to break through that door as if it's some glorious thing. I'm like, well, look to your left. That door's open. Just walk that way. And I think mentors can provide that kind of perspective, because perhaps they've had similar experience. Perhaps they're just wise people. They just kind of realize they know who you are, they know the situation or situation, and they can really provide some guidance for you. But I've taken that advice to heart, because I'm like, I'm too tired and lazy to try to break down a closed door. I'd rather just turn the knob and walk through an open one. It's just a lot easier for me.
And so there's a beautiful, I was talking of LinkedIn. I recently met a wonderful pediatric anesthesiologist, actually, who has talked a lot about work-life alignment. And one of the things that she had said at one point was, when there are doors that are closed, consider it like, I'm paraphrasing, but there are signs pointing you in another direction,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's so easy to get like so focused on what you didn't get, like,
Right.
oh, this was my one shot or my one opportunity. And maybe that wasn't an opportunity that was meant for you.
Yeah, right.
But your job is to figure out what was the opportunity, like where is that pointing you? And it was just such a beautiful, again, way to maybe put some optimism on things that don't go your way.
I don't think it's optimistic or pessimistic. I think it's the truth.
Yeah.
I think it's a universal truth. I'm never going to be an ultra 100K runner like Jamie. Joanna, I don't have your patience and intelligence. I know where my strengths are, and I'm going to stay in my lane. And that's got me a long distance. So like, why would I try to deviate from something, that's something different? I'm happy. My family's happy. My work environment is fulfilling. I feel like I've accomplished what I need, and I'm trying to summate all of this, Jeff. I'm looking at the clock. So I'm doing this for you. I'm doing your job, essentially. So next week it's going to be me and Joe, and you're going to be. Anyway, I think I've changed, Joe, and I think you probably detected that, because I've heard from when the students see me and we meet at conference or whatever, like, do you remember me? And I'm like, no, not really. And then they'll start talking about it, and they're like, man, we were really scared of you. Yeah. And I was like, what? I'm just kind of shocked. And then I kind of self-reflect. I'm like, I can see how they think that, how they thought that. I hope, Joanne, because we spent a little more time than the average student, that I think you detected my passion and interest that I wanted you guys to do as well as you possibly could. I was not able to convey that well. That was on me. And so it was never a really good fit for me in teaching at that level. But I think, I think one of the things that, because life is so hectic, is what do you guys do? I do this too. When you have a minute where you're not doing anything, what do? You pick up your phone, don't you? And you scroll, right? You're on LinkedIn, you're on Facebook or whatever, you're checking your email. So there's no time to reflect anymore. Where that moment of time where people had in the past, where even when computers were there, where we had landlines, where there was a second there, a couple moments in the day where, and Jeff knows, Joanne, you grew up in this technology, but Jeff and I were there where there was no cell phones. Computers were word processors, essentially. And so when you were at work, you were doing work, and then you were not or at home, but you had moments where there was no distraction. So what do? You go internal. You start thinking about things, your life, who you are, and all those questions. And I think that doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately. So as a piece of like outgoing advice to everybody, do that. And sometimes the way I do it is I watch TV and I blank out, because TV is just background noise, right? And I watch HGTV, by the way, because when they like remodel, like I've seen all of that already. So I'm actually thinking, that's just background, noise that kind of fills the space, if you will. And I find that to be very helpful. Not HGTV, because I still don't know how to build anything, but I'm just saying that process.
That's interesting. You mentioned the lack of time and time to think and reflect, because I think there's times when people are very creative, and it's when they do have that time. They force that time, because it is so easy to get on the treadmill, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, next Zoom meeting, whatever, right?
Yep.
So,
yeah, right. Exactly.
Paul, I think we hit on a bunch of cool things this episode, and we are so grateful that you joined us. But one of the cool things about Dean's Chat is we've got your entire CV and your bio here, and we didn't talk about your accomplishments at all. We talked about Paul.
Yeah, that's great, right? That's the purpose.
That's what we're loving, right? That's what's so cool
we don't need to talk about that. That stuff is irrelevant. I mean, I came in with an agenda, Joe and Jeff. I think you probably have heard that because I'm always in preparation mode. And when I was thinking about this during the day today, I was like, okay, what am I going to talk about? I don't want to talk about my work. I think what's a more interesting discussion to people, it's more engaging, is how I think. And not to say that I'm right or I'm wise or anything like that, but maybe there's somebody out there that thinks like me, and then they're much younger than me, and I want to tell them it'll be all right. Everything's going to be all right. I think if you do take, just be, again, honest with yourself, do some introspection, find the right mentors. I think everything kind of works out in the end.
Well, I think the other neat thing is this isn't the last time that we're going to be together on Dean's Chat, because I'm looking forward to our next discussion. We'll talk about.
I was just saying there are so many things we just barely scratched the surface, and we need to come back to the idea of reflection. Feedback and reflection are two things we had not yet. And then I'll put a little cliffhanger out there. I have a great story about it for later. My very first perception of you, Dr. Kim, as a student. So we'll save that one.
That's a cliffhanger.
Yeah, we'll save it.
Because you definitely scared me.
Yeah, well, you and I could do that over a beer sometime.
That works.
So, Paul, the other thing is you can reflect over a cup of coffee in the Dean's Chat cup we're going to send
There you go.
Oh, we get parting gifts. That's amazing.
That's right.
I've got my University of Colorado Buffalo. That was alumni. Jamie and my connection is with the University of Colorado. By the way, I'm going to be there next weekend. That's kind of interesting. Does she live there?
Yes. Yeah. I'll text you over her number.
That's funny. Okay, well, I don't want to bother her. She's like, oh, who's this creepy guy?
I'm sure
I guarantee you she'd love to hear from you.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Paul, thanks so much again. And to all of our listeners out there on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, please give us a 5-star rating. And of course, if you're watching on YouTube, please become a subscriber. And until next week, everybody, cheers.